My ex-wife sent our kids to therapy to prove I was unstable, but the therapist's report exposed her instead. After our divorce, Veronica was relentless. She'd document every interaction, recording phone calls where I asked about soccer practice. Her lawyer painted me as an unhinged father who couldn't accept the marriage was over. When I requested joint custody, she claimed I was becoming increasingly erratic and potentially dangerous. The final blow came when she enrolled our twins, Ezra and Piper, in weekly sessions with Dr. Kelman, a child psychologist. The children are exhibiting concerning behaviors since spending time with their father, she told the court. I was devastated. My own kids were being used as weapons against me. For 3 months, I watched my children trudge into that office building every Tuesday. Veronica would arrive early, clutching a folder filled with notes about my alleged instability. She'd practiced her concerned mother routine perfectly. The worried furrow of her brow, the way she'd clutch her purse when discussing my episodes. Dr. Kelman was thorough. She met with the twins individually and with each parent separately. During my sessions, she asked probing questions about my mental health and feelings about the divorce. I answered honestly, knowing Veronica was probably coaching the kids. 3 months later, Dr. Kelman's report arrived. I opened it expecting the worst. Instead, I found detailed documentation of something else entirely. The children had disclosed that Mommy had special friends who stayed overnight, that she'd leave them alone for hours while she went to wine bars, that she'd coached them extensively on what to say about Daddy being frightening. But the most damning revelation was buried on page 7. Ezra had told Dr. Kelman that Mommy made them practice conversations about Daddy being scary. If they didn't sound convincing during rehearsals, she'd make them repeat the lines until their fear sounded genuine. She'd even shown them videos of angry men yelling to help them remember how Daddy supposedly acted. The report recommended immediate investigation into parental alienation and possible emotional abuse. I called my lawyer immediately, hands shaking. Veronica had been so focused on destroying me that she'd exposed her own manipulation tactics to a mandated reporter. The emergency custody hearing was scheduled for the following week, but when I went to pick up the kids for my supervised visit, they weren't there. The house was empty except for a note. "You'll never find us." That's when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Daddy?" Piper's voice was barely a whisper. "Mommy says we're going on a very long trip and we can't tell anyone where we're going. But I'm scared. I think we're in trouble." The line went dead. I immediately called 911, then my lawyer, then Dr. Kelman. Within an hour, an Amber Alert was issued. The police traced the call to a gas station 200 miles north, but by the time they arrived, the surveillance footage showed Veronica's silver Honda pulling away 30 minutes earlier. Detective Morrison, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, met me at the station. "Mr. Hayes, we're treating this as parental kidnapping. Do you have any idea where your ex-wife might go?" I thought frantically. Veronica's sister lived in Portland, but they'd had a falling out years ago. Her parents were dead. She had no close friends, at least none I knew about. "She mentioned a cabin once," I said suddenly. "Her college roommate's family had a place in the mountains, somewhere near Asheville, I think." Detective Morrison nodded and made notes. "We'll check it out. In the meantime, keep your phone on. If they call again, try to keep them talking." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Piper's terrified voice, wondering what lies Veronica was telling them now. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop looking for us. You'll only make things worse for them." I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Detective Morrison. 20 minutes later, she called. The text came from a burner phone, but we got a cell tower ping. "They're definitely heading toward North Carolina. We've alerted state police." The next 48 hours crawled by. I sat by my phone, jumping at every notification. Friends brought food I couldn't eat. My brother drove down from Ohio to sit with me. The local news picked up the story, showing school photos of the twins and asking for tips. On Thursday morning, my phone rang. This time it was Ezra. "Dad?" His voice was different, older somehow. "I think Mom's getting sicker." "Sicker how, buddy?" "She keeps talking to people who aren't here, and she bought a gun yesterday." My blood turned to ice. "Ezra, where are you?" "I don't know. Some cabin. It smells like dead fish and there's no electricity. Mom says the government is after us because of the lies you told. She says we might have to disappear forever." "Listen to me very carefully," I said, fighting to keep my voice calm. "Can you see any road signs? Any numbers on the cabin?" "There's a mailbox down the hill. It says 305 Whisper Creek Road." "You're being so brave, son. Is Piper okay?" "She's been crying a lot. Mom gave her some of her sleeping pills to make her stop." That detail made my decision. I couldn't wait for the police. "Ezra, I need you to do something very important. Hide this phone somewhere Mom won't find it, but keep it on. Can you do that?" "Yeah, Dad, I'm scared." "I know, buddy. I'm coming to get you. Both of you. Just hang on." I hung up and immediately called Detective Morrison. "We have a location, Whisper Creek Road, probably in the Asheville area. And Detective, Veronica's armed now, and she's given medication to my 7-year-old daughter. We're mobilizing now. Mr. Hayes, you need to stay put. Let us handle this." But I was already grabbing my keys. I'd spent 3 years being the good guy, following rules while Veronica destroyed my relationship with my children. Not anymore. The drive to North Carolina took 4 hours. I called Detective Morrison every 30 minutes with updates on my location. She'd stopped ordering me to turn around and started coordinating with local law enforcement instead. Whisper Creek Road turned out to be a winding dirt path that snaked up into the mountains. I found number 305 just as the sun was setting, a rundown cabin with broken shutters and a sagging front porch. Veronica's Honda was parked behind a cluster of pine trees. I cut my engine a quarter-mile down the road and hiked back. Through the grimy front window, I could see a kerosene lamp flickering inside. Veronica was pacing, gesturing wildly while talking to herself. I couldn't see the kids. My phone vibrated with a text from Ezra's hidden phone. Basement. Door behind kitchen. I crept around to the back of the cabin and found a small window that looked into what must have been a root cellar. In the dim light, I could make out two small figures huddled together on an old mattress. The window was painted shut, but the frame was rotted. I worked at it with my car keys until it gave way with a soft crack. Ezra, I whispered. Piper! Both kids looked up, and Piper started to cry with relief. I squeezed through the window, dropping down into the musty basement. Are you hurt? I asked, checking them over quickly. Piper's really sleepy, Ezra whispered, and Mom keeps talking about how we're going to live in the woods forever. She burned our passports this morning. I could hear footsteps creaking overhead. Veronica was still pacing, still talking to her invisible audience. We're going to climb out this window, I told them, very quietly. Ezra, you go first, then help me get Piper up. It took several minutes to boost both kids through the small opening. Piper was barely conscious from whatever Veronica had given her. As I lifted her toward the window, her foot knocked over an empty bottle. The sound seemed to echo through the old cabin. The footsteps overhead stopped. Kids? Veronica's voice drifted down. What was that noise? I froze, holding Piper halfway through the window. Ezra had already crawled outside and was reaching back to help. Kids, answer me! Footsteps moved toward what must have been the basement door. I shoved Piper the rest of the way through the window and scrambled up after her. We were just getting to our feet when I heard the basement door slam open. They're gone! Veronica shrieked. He found us! He found us! We ran toward my car, me carrying a groggy Piper while Ezra sprinted beside us. Behind us, the cabin's front door crashed open. You bastard! Veronica screamed into the darkness. You're not taking them from me. I heard something that might have been a gunshot, but couldn't be sure. We reached the car and I threw both kids into the back seat. Stay down, I ordered, starting the engine. As we pulled away, I could see Veronica in my rearview mirror, standing in the road with something dark in her hands. The headlights illuminated her face, wild-eyed and twisted with rage. I drove straight to the Asheville Police Department, where Detective Morrison and a medical team were waiting. Piper was rushed to the hospital to check for drug poisoning, while Ezra gave his statement to a child psychologist. Within 2 hours, a SWAT team had surrounded the cabin. Veronica barricaded herself inside for 6 hours before finally surrendering. The gun turned out to be a starter pistol, realistic-looking but incapable of firing real bullets. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court revealed what Dr. Kelman's original report had only hinted at. Veronica had suffered a complete break from reality. Her elaborate schemes to frame me had escalated into full-blown paranoid delusions. She genuinely believed that government agents were working with me to steal the children. During the custody hearing 3 weeks later, Dr. Kelman testified about the children's statements regarding their mother's coaching. Veronica's own lawyer presented evidence of her mental breakdown. The judge awarded me full custody with supervised visitation for Veronica, once she completed a minimum 6-month psychiatric treatment program. But the real victory came that night when I tucked both kids into their beds in their old rooms. Dad, Piper said softly, are we safe now? Yes, sweetheart, you're safe. Good, she whispered. I missed you so much. 6 months later, Veronica began her supervised visits. The first few were tense. She'd sit stiffly across from the kids while a social worker monitored every interaction. But gradually, with medication and therapy, glimpses of the woman I'd once loved began to reappear. The children had their own therapy with Dr. Kelman to process everything they'd been through. It took time for them to stop flinching when raised voices came from the TV, to believe that they weren't in trouble for telling the truth. One evening, as I was helping Ezra with homework, he looked up at me. Dad, why did Mom try to make us hate you? I'd been dreading this question for months. Sometimes when people are really hurt and scared, they make bad choices, I said carefully. Your mom was sick in her mind, and that made her think things that weren't true. But she's getting better now? She's trying to. And that's what matters. Will she ever be normal again? I thought about that. The psychiatrist had been cautiously optimistic, but cautioned that recovery from a psychotic break could take years if it happened at all. I don't know, buddy. But whatever happens, you and Piper are safe. That's my job, to keep you safe. He nodded and returned to his math problems. Such a simple conversation, but it represented something I'd never had during my own childhood. A parent who told the truth, who prioritized protecting rather than manipulating. The divorce had been finalized for over a year now, but it felt like I was just beginning to understand what that meant. Not just the end of a marriage, but the beginning of a different kind of family. One built on honesty instead of performance, safety instead of fear. 3 months into Veronica's visits, she started asking about the kids' daily routines, their friends, their favorite foods. Small questions that showed she was beginning to see them as separate people rather than extensions of herself. How's Piper doing with her reading? She asked during one session. She's doing great, I replied honestly. She finished the entire Magic Treehouse series last month. For a moment, genuine pride flickered across Veronica's face. It was the first time I'd seen her express an emotion that wasn't about winning or losing. But progress wasn't linear. There were setbacks, Times when she'd slip back into blaming me for destroying our family, or when she'd beg the kids to tell the social worker they wanted to live with her. During those sessions, I'd watch Ezra and Piper shut down, their faces going carefully blank the way they'd learned to survive. Dr. Kelman worked with all of us, separately and together, to rebuild trust and communication. She taught the kids that they could love their mother while still needing boundaries. She helped me understand that my role wasn't to fix Veronica, but to provide stability for our children. Recovery from parental alienation isn't just about the targeted parent regaining relationship with their children, she explained during one of our sessions. It's about the children learning that love doesn't require betraying the other parent. The breakthrough came 7 months after Veronica's breakdown. During a supervised visit, Piper started crying because she'd forgotten to bring a drawing she'd made at school. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said. "You can bring it next time." But Veronica stood up abruptly. "Wait here." She disappeared for 10 minutes, then returned with construction paper and crayons from the activity room. "Want to make a new one?" she asked Piper. "I'd love to see what you're learning to draw." They spent the next hour coloring together, really together, not the performative parenting Veronica had done before. No cameras, no audience to impress, just a mother helping her daughter draw purple unicorns. When the session ended, Veronica hugged both kids goodbye without clinging or making promises about getting them back. She hugged me too, briefly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not letting me destroy them completely." I started attending Al-Anon meetings, not because Veronica had a drinking problem, but because the principles applied to any relationship with someone whose behavior had become unmanageable. Learning to detach with love, to focus on what I could control instead of what I couldn't. The other parents in the group had stories that resonated. Spouses who'd disappeared with children during bitter divorces, custody battles that had lasted years, the unique trauma of loving someone who'd used your children as weapons. "The hardest part," said Bethany, whose ex-husband had taken their son to Mexico for 8 months, "was realizing that I couldn't love her enough to make him stop hurting us." That hit me like a physical blow. For years, I'd believed that if I could just be patient enough, reasonable enough, accommodating enough, Veronica would eventually see reason. But you can't logic someone out of a delusion. The kids started expressing their own feelings about the situation with increasing confidence. Piper drew pictures of the scary cabin and talked about how confused she'd been when Mommy started acting strange. Ezra wrote stories about brave knights who saved princesses from dragons, thinly veiled metaphors for our family situation. "I was worried you wouldn't believe us," he admitted during one therapy session. "Mom said you'd think we were making it up." "I'll always believe you when you tell me the truth," I promised. Always. It was such a simple statement, but I could see how much it meant to them. They'd spent months being gaslit, told their own perceptions couldn't be trusted. As winter turned to spring, Veronica's visits became less supervised. She was allowed to take the kids to the park across from the therapy center, then eventually to lunch at a nearby restaurant. Each expansion of privilege was earned through consistent behavior and honest communication. The first overnight visit was scheduled for a Saturday in April. I spent the entire night awake, checking my phone every 10 minutes. But when I picked them up Sunday evening, both kids seemed relaxed. "Mom made pancakes," Piper reported, "and she didn't talk about any weird stuff. She just asked about school and soccer. Did you have fun?" "Yeah, it was nice, like before she got sick." That phrase, "before she got sick," became how we all referred to the period of Veronica's breakdown. Not when Mom was bad or when Mom lied, but acknowledging that mental illness had been the driving force behind her actions. It wasn't about excusing what had happened, but about helping the children understand that their mother's love for them had never been the problem. The illness had distorted that love into something harmful, but underneath it, the connection remained. During one of our family therapy sessions, Dr. Kelman asked Veronica directly about her actions during the worst period. "I know I hurt them," Veronica said, tears streaming down her face. "I told myself I was protecting them, but I was really trying to hurt you, and they got caught in the middle." She turned to Ezra and Piper. I'm so sorry I made you afraid and confused. You didn't deserve any of that." Both kids were crying too. Piper climbed into Veronica's lap, the first time she'd initiated physical contact since the kidnapping. "I forgive you, Mommy," she whispered. "But don't get sick again, okay?" "I'm going to try very hard not to," Veronica promised. Progress wasn't just happening in therapy. At home, the kids were becoming more confident, more willing to express opinions and preferences they'd learned to hide. Ezra joined the debate team at school. Piper started taking piano lessons because she wanted to, not because it would look good to an audience. Small things revealed how much they'd been walking on eggshells before. Ezra admitted he'd been afraid to mention that he liked visiting me because it might upset his mom. Piper had stopped drawing pictures of our family because Veronica always asked why Daddy was in them. "You can draw whatever makes you happy," I told her. "Families, puppies, aliens, whatever." She started drawing everything. Elaborate scenes of our daily life, fantastical creatures, abstract swirls of color that she said represented her feelings. The refrigerator became an art gallery. Meanwhile, Veronica was rebuilding her life too. She'd started working part-time at a nonprofit that helped other families navigate mental health crises. Her own experience with psychosis, once stabilized, gave her unique insight into what parents were going through. "I want something good to come from all of this," she told me during one of our rare private conversations. "If my story can help other families avoid what we went through," she'd lost weight and looked healthier than she had in years. The manic energy that had driven her obsessive campaign against me had been replaced by a calmer determination to rebuild trust. But she was also realistic about the damage that had been done. I know things will never be the way they were before, she said. I know I can't undo the fear I put them through. I just want to be the mother they deserve from now on. During the summer, we established a more regular custody schedule. The kids would spend weekdays with me and weekends with Veronica, with flexibility for holidays and special events. It wasn't the 50-50 split she'd originally fought for, but it gave everyone space to heal. I started dating again, carefully, slowly, always with the children's emotional well-being as the priority. Nothing serious yet, but it felt good to imagine a future that included the possibility of partnership again. The kids were curious, but not threatened by the idea of me dating. Would she be like a stepmom? Ezra asked when I mentioned having dinner with someone new. Maybe someday if things work out, but that's way in the future, and no one will ever replace your mom. Good, Piper said decisively. I only want one mom, but it would be nice if you had someone to watch movies with, out of the mouths of babes. In September, exactly 1 year after Veronica's breakdown, we had our final family therapy session with Dr. Kelman. She pronounced the children remarkably resilient and well-adjusted considering what they'd been through. You've all done the hard work of rebuilding trust and communication, she said. The foundation is solid now. As we left her office for the last time, Ezra looked up at me. Dad, do you think Mom will stay better? It was the question I'd been asking myself for months. I think she's working really hard to stay healthy, I said. And if she ever starts getting sick again, we'll know what to watch for. We'll be ready. Will you protect us if she gets scary again? Always. That's what dads are for. He nodded, satisfied. At 10 years old, he'd learned lessons about trust and safety that most adults never had to face. But he'd also learned that recovery was possible, that people could change, that love could survive even the worst circumstances. 3 months later, Veronica called me with news. She'd been accepted into a graduate program for family therapy, specializing in high-conflict divorce cases. I want to help other families before they get to where we were, she explained. Maybe prevent some kids from going through what ours did. It was exactly the kind of work she should be doing, using her experience to help others while continuing her own healing process. That's wonderful, I told her. The kids will be proud of you. And they were. When she told them about graduate school during their next visit, Piper clapped her hands with excitement. You're going to help families like Dr. Kelman helped us? That's the plan, sweetheart. That's the best job ever, Ezra declared, helping people feel safe. The irony wasn't lost on any of us, that Veronica's future career would be built around preventing the kind of damage she'd once inflicted, but it felt like justice of a different sort. Not punishment, but transformation. That Christmas, we all had dinner together for the first time in almost 2 years. Not as a reunited family, but as two parents who'd learned to put their children's needs above their own conflicts. Veronica brought homemade cookies. I cooked the turkey. The kids showed off their school projects and argued about what movie to watch afterward. It felt almost normal, a new kind of normal we'd built from the wreckage of our old life. As I tucked them into bed that night, Piper asked the question that had been on my mind too. Are we fixed now, Dad? I thought about how to answer that. We weren't the same family we'd been before. We'd all been changed by what we'd been through. But maybe that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. We're different now, I said, but we're strong, and we're honest with each other, and we love each other. So, yeah, I think we're fixed. She smiled and closed her eyes. In the living room, Veronica was cleaning up wrapping paper while Ezra built something complicated with his new Legos. Thank you, she said quietly when I joined her, for giving me the chance to be their mother again. Thank you for doing the work to earn it back. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching our son concentrate on his building project. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, the first white Christmas we'd had in years. It wasn't the happily ever after we'd once imagined, but it was something better. A hard-won peace built on truth instead of fantasy, safety instead of control, and it was enough. 2 years later, I was standing in the courthouse again, but this time for a different reason. Veronica was graduating from her master's program, and the kids had asked if we could all attend the ceremony together. She walked across the stage to receive her degree in family therapy, and both kids cheered so loudly that other families turned to look. I found myself clapping too, genuinely proud of how far she'd come. Afterward, at the graduation party, I watched her talk to other students about her thesis on parental alienation recovery. She was animated and confident, but in a healthy way, passionate about helping families rather than driven by the manic energy that had once consumed her. She's really different now, Ezra observed, following my gaze. People can change, I agreed. It's hard work, and it takes time, but people can change. The woman who'd once kidnapped our children and tried to destroy my relationship with them was now dedicating her career to preventing other families from experiencing that same trauma. It wasn't redemption exactly, but it was something close to it. As we left the courthouse, Piper slipped her hand into mine. Dad, I'm glad we're all friends now. Me too, kiddo. Me too. The long nightmare of our custody battle had finally ended, not with victory or defeat, but with healing. It had taken 3 years, countless hours of therapy, and more emotional labor than any of us had thought possible. But we'd found our way back to each other. Not as the family we'd once been, but as the family we'd chosen to become. And that was worth everything we'd endured to get here. Now, 5 years after that first devastating custody hearing, I watch my children navigate their own challenges with confidence and honesty. They're not afraid to express their feelings or advocate for their needs. They've learned that love doesn't require silence or pretense. Ezra is 15 now, starting to think about college. When friends ask about his parents' divorce, he says matter-of-factly that his mom had a mental health crisis but got better. No shame, no secrets, just truth. Piper, at 12, is fierce and funny and completely sure of herself. She wants to be a veterinarian and a professional soccer player and possibly the president, depending on her mood. The little girl who once whispered that she was scared has grown into someone who speaks her mind without fear. Sometimes I think about the parallel universe where Dr. Kelman's report had gone the other way, where Veronica's manipulation had worked and I'd lost my children forever. How different their lives would have been, growing up believing their father was dangerous, learning that love meant choosing sides. Instead, they learned that even the worst situations can be survived, that families can heal from seemingly impossible wounds, that mental illness is treatable and recovery is possible. They learned that sometimes protecting the people you love means saying no to them. That honesty is more important than keeping the peace. That adults can make mistakes, even terrible ones, and still deserve forgiveness if they do the work to change. These are lessons I never expected to teach, but they're lessons that will serve my children well as they build their own relationships, make their own choices about whom to trust and how to love. The custody battle that nearly destroyed our family ultimately made us stronger, not because of what we endured, but because of how we chose to heal from it, together. And in the end, that's the only victory that matters.